Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I am Michael Branson Smith, and I am here with
Jim Groom.
He's been out of the studio, out in the main room. He is living large because he's got family that needed the space. And that's what this is about, family, isn't it?
Exactly. I've been moved out for family. This is the bunker part of my basement. My basement contains multitudes.
Yeah.
And that's my Windows 98 machine right now that I'm working on to have an accessory called a mini disc. That's my other project right now. I don't even want to.
Oh, you mean like mini disc audio?
Yeah, a mini disc Walkman.
Oh,
Someone sent me one from England.
Oh, do you know that, well, in a former life when I was making things that were actual, creative projects rather than talking about creative projects like we're doing right now, I used to make a lot of sound art. This is like one of my masters in fine arts discoveries. This woman named Lauren Wanger, she was fucking incredible sound artist. And she had us, making all this like experimental music, and our recording medium was mini disc. We all recorded on mini disc with these little, Sony stereo microphones, and I made a bunch of crazy shit.
Exactly what I have. It's a super cool little machine. It's like 2003 era.
It was like classic, it had the artifact of the 80s, it was like the cool, what was the cool Walkman brand from that era? That was one of the many Japanese brands. And it was like this really great piece of compact Japanese technology.
It was like Aika, A-I-K-A?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Aiwa.
That's right, Aiwa. Yeah.
That was like the coveted brand. Like they were, they were cooler than Sony products and all that stuff too.
See, you sound like Frank Sabaka from The Wire, though. Back when we used to make things in this country.
Actually, this is Japan was making these things. It wasn't us. Well, Japan was our last film, right? The Tokyo Story. But we are continuing on with our kind of generational conflict with the focus primarily on older generations dealing with their older adults dealing with their older parents. And we're bridging, this is our bridge film. This is the film that's bridging between the greatest generation and the boomer generation to finally the Generation X, which is going to be our final two films and their perspective on this plight. And understandably, our generation's perspective is going to deal with single adults, where the first three films, all of them deal with these beautiful aging relationships of people in their 70s, basically, gracefully or less gracefully exiting this, entering the final stages of their lives. And this is on Golden Pond from 1981, directed by Mark Rydell, who's an interesting director in that he was an actor first, and he was like a character on As the World Turns for like almost 7 years. And it's hilarious. Like, he didn't take a long-term contract. He's like, I'm too good for the soap opera. And so they killed him, which is great. I love shit like that.
It's a mean world, the soap opera world. We've talked about that when we talked about Night of the Comet. Like, both of those actresses were soap opera actresses. And so they were there to work. Like, they understood that it was a chop shop. I love that.
Yeah. 5 days a week making television. That would just be insane. I actually love that idea. I wish I could have done that. And he was also in The Long Goodbye, a famous Robert Altman film. But he found his way into directing. He did a lot of television directing. And he's obviously most famous, if you did, for this film. He's not a well-known director by any stretch of the imagination. I imagine he's kind of, of an era when, he was cozy with a lot of big, figures in Hollywood, but he stumbles into this film through the writer, Ernest Thompson. So writer Ernest Thompson, who also does not have much of an IMDb, writes this play about his life growing up, spending summers in, I think it was New Hampshire or Vermont, and it was a thing. It was a artifact of a different time when families would just like leave their lives for an entire summer and be on holiday for 2.5 months. How fucking awesome does that sound?
Okay, so I'm going to start with my first of probably many stories for this one, because this one hits a lot of different kind of bells for me. And one of the bells that it hits is, so I used to go, my friend his family was, his mom and dad were divorced. His mom lived on Long Island and his dad lived up in Lake George. So actually for 2 months, he would, leave Long Island and go up to Lake George. And we were pretty close. So I would actually go with him and I would stay, several weeks, if not months.
Oh.
And this movie with those teak boats and the beautiful lake, and his dad had a lakefront property, and he was large in Lake George at a boat and landing. And this movie is very reminiscent for me of that, but also, like you said, more of a Gen X feel, like parents separated, going up with one, kind of hang out, kind of like Billy Jr.'s experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So you can see that generational, like you're talking about, the Greatest Generation, they're solid. Katharine Hepburn and Henry Fonda doing well. Jane going through husbands, a change of clothes. And then poor Billy.
Poor fucking Billy, man.
Latchkey.
Yeah, he is.
Latchkey vacation, baby.
Total. I mean, it's interesting. This is a bit, so to back up. So there's a lot of interesting stories here, and it does cross 3 generations, and it does start with Katharine Hepburn and Henry Fonda playing the leads of Ethel and Norman Sayre, this couple in their 70s in their twilight, and, persisting with their routine of spending their summers in their summer, cabin on a lake. But at the same time, these are 2 of the biggest stars in Golden Hollywood, in the history of Golden Hollywood. I mean, Katharine Hepburn, I never, this film is fun because, I'm sorry, this whole process, as we know, has been a big part of creating a film studies course for ourselves, for better, for lack of a better description. And to read about Katharine Hepburn as this fiercely independent woman who married once and then was smart enough to not marry again, and was able to keep a relationship with Spencer Tracy private enough from the press. She eschewed working with the press, which probably held back her career at times, and she constantly had to reinvent herself because she was so independent-minded. And she's lucky to be from a wealthy family that's super liberal. Her mother was literally a suffragist, so really, really early feminism, right, of the particular type. And then you have Henry Fonda, who is the classic, Jimmy Stewart type actor, or Spencer Tracy, and these guys did 4 or 5 movies a year, and we're just killing it, and picture after picture, and some were flops and some they were amazing, but these are the ones that he and Jimmy Stewart and Spencer Tracy, these are the cream, and Humphrey Bogart, these are literally the cream of the crop actors. And Henry Fonda persisted all the way, he literally does this film as he's dying. And that's a big part of this story, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and he played, he was in Hitchcock movies. He was in The Lumet Failsafe. You can name so many great movies he was in. He was in Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, the only time he played a bad guy. He has a legendary career. And he was a fucking great bad guy, right? That's the other thing. You could see him relishing that. It's finally, I can dig in on this, But I mean, these are 2 epic stars that are kind of in a film with a no-name director, a very limited set. It's an interesting kind of revaluation of their careers, which both of them are, pretty much towards the end of them. They're in their mid-70s, both of them. I think she's 74, he's 75, even if he's supposed to be 80 in the movie. And it's interesting, it's interesting that they're working with this kind of second-tier director. And, here they are. And I think the reason why they're all there doing that is why, Michael?
Jane Fonda. And so one of the things we both kind of landed on is the story of Jane Fonda. And, we've already done one of these pictures, and it was Tatum O'Neal and Ryan O'Neal in Paper Moon, where basically it's a father-daughter film. And that's a much different version because you have a Tatum O'Neal who's literally only 10 years old and very much not in control of her life, and struggles mightily for the rest of her life to reconcile her relationship with her father. Well, this is the other side of that, where you have Jane Fonda, who's this incredibly successful movie star in her own right, already has won 2 Academy Awards, and her father's won none. Those he's been nominated more than once and considered one of the greats of all time. And it was an era where like Academy Awards were given for weird reasons, and
how that's like, changed.
Yeah, I know. It's still, I know. And it's like the fact that like Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda or Cary Grant don't like have their own buckets of Academy Awards is always just so bizarre to me. It's like, it's like Leonardo DiCaprio. It's like, how does he only have 1 Academy Award? It's similar to that, right? You're right. It hasn't changed at all. So Jane Fonda, has this tough relationship with her father ultimately. And, not unlike, Tatum O'Neal and Ryan O'Neal and to their adult life. And she watches this play written by Ernest Thompson. That's kind of a small success. It's critically acclaimed in a funny way. It's more like a popular film than a critically acclaimed. I'm sorry, it's not a critically acclaimed play because it's really schmaltzy ultimately. It's like, the story of getting old and dealing with death, and it's all really on the nose. The text is right in front of you. The subtext is what we're talking about, is real life, is the subtext of this movie, because Jane Fonda basically buys the rights to this play to produce it so she can create an opportunity to reconcile with her father, which is fucking insane. And as my friend Danny, who I was talking to right before this, said, it's like, that's some really expensive therapy right there.
Actually. Brilliantly said. Yeah, and it's interesting too, because, you have, and you brought it up, as we were getting ready for this, you have the greatest generation. Henry Fonda certainly kind of represents that figure. And then you have the boomers, and you have Jane Fonda, who was definitely a boomer, but was like a boomer in this fact, like, here she was in the 60s and 70s, was a radical, was definitely kind of a radical feminist, like you would say Katharine Hepburn might have been in her day. So there's that relationship. Yeah. But like also she did some shit that pissed off a lot of people, and like I wonder if her dad was one of them, like when she was sitting on a North Vietnamese tank, and like all of that stuff maybe comes together because you have to feel, and I guess she's very clear about it out of the movie, like they never really did have like a very good relationship, nor did they have, her mom committed suicide fairly early. Like there was some fucked up shit going on behind there. And it's interesting that this movie, like you said, represents a very simple tale, and the whole Fonda legacy is the subtext, and these two people dealing with what everyone knows. They're household names, right? Like, I'm 9 or 10 years old. I know Jane Fonda's name, even more so than her dad, Henry Fonda. It's actually this movie that reminds me that Henry Fonda exists and that he got an Academy Award. And then you go back as you get older and see some of his classics like The Wrong Man or Failsafe, etc. So The Wrong Man. It's interesting.
I love Mr. Roberts, actually, one of those like classic comedy dramas of that era, like, navigating World War II through a discourse of humor and light on the reality of war, the trauma of war, and trying to navigate that. And that was like, it's a fun movie, and it's got Jack Lemmon, and he's of this era that you're right. Like, it's funny because when we grew up in such a monoculture era on Golden Pond, even though we're only like 10, 11 years old, we know about this movie. It's like now our kids are like, what the fuck is on Golden Pond? Isn't that for old people? Like they would never come across a film like this. Really.
Exactly.
And the fact that this film can make it to us, and then even has a character we get to relate to in the form of Billy, who's a child of divorce we get to talk about, who is the son of Chelsea, Jane Fonda's character, it's her new boyfriend, right? Who's a dentist played by Dabney Coleman. Dabney Coleman kills it, man. He comes in hot, and he is like steamrolling the set until it's over. I mean, though Henry Fonda's, this character he creates of a cantankerous old man is iconic, right? It's incomparable.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Antonella is struggling with it too, because she's like, it's almost not like a type I know, although it's a lot like types, but it's almost like he's creating this completely novel character, right? And I think there's something to that, like the way he talks, the way how kind of smart ass he is, but then he's also super smart. He's also compassionate. Like, you don't know ever which way he's going, even with his wife, who he loves and who's been with for, 60 years or 70 years. I mean, it's 60 years. So it's a super wild character. It's almost like, outside of reality as much as you still relate to it. It's a strange creation, I have to say. Something that she kept on saying, like, I don't know how to deal with his character, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, and I think that it's this is the luck of this director, ultimately. And he spoke of that, and there's this interesting anecdote that he relates, and there's a really simple little DVD extra documentary that I found on YouTube called Love Against Time. That was the making of the movie. And, the contemporaneous reviews, were interesting because the story is so like saccharine in ways, right? And it's melodramatic and simplistic, but because the performances are so iconic and the characterizations are so realized, we can't help but relate to it and feel for these characters in this melodramatic piece. It's like, there's this other podcast I listened to on through this network of podcasts that's about pictures, and they talked about they wish famous people would do simple pictures more often, less important films, right? Or action films, like just simple, like, erotic thrillers was the example that they were talking about, right? Like that genre is gone. And in this erotic thriller, Bill Murray shows up for a hot minute as a detective. And because it's Bill Murray, the performance is incredible. And because it's Henry Fonda creating this cantankerous old man, and the investment he makes as an actor in what he's truly struggling with is he is actually struggling with his own mortality. Like, he sadly dies within 6 months after the production is over. It is his last chance. It's his final film, and he literally knows it. And it's kind of wild because of that.
Yeah, and to think he, like you said, never won an Academy Award. He and both Katharine Hepburn both win an Academy Award for this, as does the writer for Best Screenplay. I mean, it's kind of, and like you said, it's kind of a nothing film, but it's now, I mean, I remember going into the movie, the VHS video store, and being like, everywhere on Golden Pond. My mom was like, on Golden Pond. Like, obviously, as an older person, like, Jane Fonda had a new kind of, and there's a whole thing about, like, what this does for Jane Fonda. And I was kind of playing with ChatGPT before this, because I was like, so was Jane Fonda's exercise empire a tie-in with Golden Pond? And ChatGPT was scolding me, was like, no. That's not how it was. The videos came out in 82 and was making sure that I wasn't talking shit about Jane Fonda. I think she paid the machine to make sure that. But, like,
there's enough text out there. She has fans.
The very figure of Jane Fonda in this film, it's almost like a turning point, not only for Jane Fonda and her career, but almost for an entire culture, about how we think about exercise, how we think about body image, right? Like, there is this whole moment where Jane Fonda becomes a spokeswoman of kind of rethinking the female body, the middle-aged body. Like, she was Barbarella as sex icon in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like sex icon in the 40s, but not in the same way, not like an American Pie way, but like in a liberation way. Like, women can still be seen as attractive in their middle age and if they're moms. And, like, there's a whole, like, moment there, and she nails it.
Yep.
And that's the 80s.
Are you saying Jane Fonda's the original MILF, Jim?
I'm not, because that comes later. Like, MILF is actually, I think, the denaturing of what Jane Fonda was actually doing. Like she has that much of a big splash and changes, cultural ideas about women in the 80s. And by the time you get to the 90s, it just becomes about sex object. Not that 80s was liberated from sex objects. I'm not saying that, but Jane Fonda's mission was not that. I want to be a MILF. Her was like, women should be able to be in movies and be attractive when they're in their middle age. And we need to rethink that, because all you had was like, bring in the next, 18-year-old, beauty queen, bring in the next. And you could see in this movie, she's doing it subtly, as ChatGPT reminded me.
But that's what Katharine Hepburn truly did, and in some ways it's disappointing that, unlike Katharine Hepburn, Jane Fonda stopped acting soon after this, and she came back many, many, many years later to do some Broadway and stuff like that. And in part, it might not be of her own making. I don't know the real story. And the story of women in acting and parts being available in older age is slim. So that's completely understandable. I think Meryl Streep is an exception that she keeps remaking her opportunities. And examples are like Devil Wears Prada, which is now in a sequel mode. But that film was like a striking portrait of a strong older woman. And those don't exist. There aren't many portraits like that. And I think that, Katharine Hepburn, there's this wonderful story about how she was in the dumps. And so in the late 30s, and she goes to Broadway to kind of reinvent herself. And she does a Philadelphia story, and it's really successful on Broadway, which leads to her comeback, to do Philadelphia story in the film. And it's with both Jimmy Stewart and I think, was it also Carrie? I don't remember. But anyway, she talks about how at the start of this film, she literally has this, she falls flat on her face moment. And she's like, I have to do this because this is what they want from me. They want to see a woman fall on her face so they can be sympathetic with her. Right. And so it's through a woman struggling, we can have sympathy with her, and then she's allowed to be strong. And so she knew that game very early about this portrait of a woman in charge is a very difficult one to play. And Jane Fonda is another icon of that. And I think that's very interesting as a modern perspective on her. But to go into her being strong and successful in the context of her father, and back to the film itself, there's this in the documentary, Jane Fonda's talking about how she's on set with her father during the Parcheesi scene. And in one of the early scenes, so Jane Fonda shows up with her boyfriend, and the Dabney Coleman performance as the boyfriend is we're going to get into, which is really fun. But they're playing Parcheesi, and she's sitting to the side because she can't handle, being engaged with her father. And I understand that if you've had a harsh relationship with your parents and you're coming back as an adult and pretending like it doesn't exist is very difficult, right? And I think this is a great emblem of that. And then the barbs start to fly. And in the scene, he says something about it. It's like, oh, she doesn't like to compete. And then she's responding, it's like, why do I always have to win for you? And that's what it is. But in the actual set, there's a similar barbs being tossed. She talks about how during her close-ups, she wants to be able to see her father, and she asked the producer, the people on set, to put some light on him so she can see his eyes. And they do, and she does her performance. And then when it's his turn to do the close-up work, she says, Dad, can you see my eyes? And his response was, I don't need to see your eyes. I'm not that kind of actor. And it's just like, it's like a target, like a dart thrown right at her. It's like, you're full of shit, honey. And she's like, what the fuck?
Exactly. Like, it's the movie, though. Like, that's exactly what's happening in the movie, to your point. Yeah. And, this idea of her playing the child and coming back, and why am I always a child at Golden Pond? Right. And, we all probably have that relationship to some degree with our parents when we come back. But, here you have two iconic actors playing this out. And it's part of, like you said, why it was so successful for the whole world. And that's why Hollywood ate it up, because it's as much about Hollywood and what that means for relationships. And Jane Fonda and Henry Fonda is a lot more amenable at this point in their career than, say, Ryan and Tatum O'Neal when they were doing and then they become a nightmare and they become drug addicts, and
they were both too young.
Train wreck, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this is kind of like, it's about personal relationships. It's about everything the film's about, yet it has this patina of it being real. And so, like, it's the movie has it all. It has these great actresses. It has this backstory, and it has Jane Fonda, who literally is trying to find herself outside of the shadow of her, behemoth, gigantic dad/star. You know, and how hard is it for any child who has an extremely successful parent and to find themselves almost equally, if not more successful? That's a rare thing to happen, because oftentimes you're psychologically beat down by the fact that I can't measure up to this person, or who am I in relationship? I'm just a small fat girl, right? The little fat girl. There's that whole playing here.
Right off
it's really powerful, right? It's well done in that regard, even if it's, totally playing into the Hollywood kind of, narcissistic mirror about everything always being about them. It's interesting. I like that.
I mean, and it is interesting because, like, the Tatum O'Neal, Ryan O'Neal situation, that's where there was like true family dysfunction, where, Ryan O'Neal is a partier and is not paying attention to his daughter, and she gets wrapped up into that and is around a lot of dysfunction and drugs and sex. This you don't get a sense that this was that story. This is a story of, like, feeling neglected, right? Just feeling not seen. It's not a dysfunctional household. It's just a indifferent household, maybe, if you will, because it's a house of a lot of wealth and whatnot. And so you don't feel like there was want for, stability, but it's still painful, and that's what's so interesting about it. And in that same moment where, Henry Fonda throws this barb at his daughter about her acting style, Katharine Hepburn more than once comes to her rescue as an actress to an actress, right? Katharine Hepburn comes up to her afterward and she says, they just don't understand, they're hurting you. And she relates the story of, she started many films with her partner of many years, Spencer Tracy, before he died. And she cared for him through his alcoholism and dysfunction of that generation, which was very common. She talks about having done a, kind of a love affair type scene with Spencer Tracy. And similarly, it's his turn to do his close-ups. And she asks, what should I do for you? And he's like, I don't need you. Go home. Right. And they're in a real relationship. It's not just this on-screen relationship. And he's like, that generation, they just don't fucking know, man. Like, they don't get it. Yeah. And which is an interesting perspective, because that's what she also represents in the picture, right? Because she is a mother, the Ethel character, who's relating to her daughter, Chelsea. She's motherly. Like, they have a connection like a mother-daughter do. But when Chelsea goes into mode, like, what's up? And which is another interesting thing, is she doesn't call him dad. Chelsea doesn't call her, she calls him Norman. Like, everybody calls him Norman. And which is really funny. And Chelsea's complaining to her mom about, like, basically the abuse she endured as a child. And Ethel's just like, get over it. You, and this is quoting from the note, you had a miserable childhood. Your father was overbearing. Your mother ignored her. What else is new? And you have a big chip on your shoulder. Get over it, bore. And she literally says, bore, bore, bore.
I love that. And she comes out as definitely the best character in the movie, her and Billy Jr. in my mind, because, like, I mean, you are seeing these two kind of play through that. And Jane Fonda she is playing in a little too much, and that line is thin. And at some point, you wonder, but at the same time, it works because what their relationship is and what you imagine. But I'm even more fascinated in some regards around, like, what is she like? What is it when she buys the rights to the film and to the screenplay and she makes the film? Like, was she like, just, was this a huge risk on her part? Like, what could this mean? Like, her and her dad have a blow up and the film never gets made? Like, I'm interested in all the ways it could have gone. It obviously went huge, but like, if you're doing this and this is as much a passion project, personal project, and all of that, those are the ones that usually go wrong.
Yeah,
right?
they typically
Terribly
do.
wrong.
Yeah.
And she didn't. This one didn't.
No, there's two things to it. I think, in the documentary, you do get a sense that there was this kind of real communal spirit that existed on the film. So it had something going for it. And you have to credit Jane Fonda to this. Like, she put this together. And so I think all the credit goes to her for creating an atmosphere for this to work for herself and her father, but for all those involved in making a movie. As we learned through our research, it's not easy. Like, there's a lot of personalities, and even Rydell talked about, the director, how he had to put his foot down with Katharine Hepburn, who saw herself as the star, and it's like, no, you're a character with Henry Fonda here. And that's the other thing I had never known. These two had literally never met before, never mind been in a movie together.
That's amazing. I saw that in the notes. Yeah. That is crazy.
It's totally crazy. And so what's interesting is there's two parts to it. It's like, there's this idea that it's being made and the spirit holds it together, because everybody's like, holy fucking shit, we have Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn and Jane Fonda on set, and we have this writer who's like made this play that's successful. Everybody knows it's a little schmaltzy, and even Dabney Coleman talks about this, the communal spirit in the space was just kind of godsmacking to them. And then at the same time, the goal is to actually create the space for reconciliation with the parent, and you don't know if it's going to work, and she makes it happen,
Yeah. That to me is interesting, because obviously there's the acting of it out, but then there's, like you said, the behind the scenes, really barbing each other, right? Like, Henry Fonda still being like, that's not how I act. Like,
it's and so the other characters, because I keep losing a track of on that, so I'll move on. We have this other idea of generations sizing one another up. And this is where Dabney Coleman characters comes in, as well as Billy, the father's son. So Dabney Coleman is playing Billy Sr. and what's his name? Doug McKeon, who's really kind of the second star of the film, I think. I really think he is. He's wonderful. He's 14, and it's his first acting gig for a movie, and he's like psyched beyond belief to be this person. And he beats out Anthony Michael Hall for this role, so what I understand.
Anthony Michael Hall tried to get this role. Huh.
Yeah.
So he goes on, McKeon, like 4 or 5 years later, he's in a film which I loved when I was growing up, Mischief, with Kelly Preston. And that's like a kind of coming of age, teenage sex movie, whatever, which is great. And he's great in it. But after that, he just disappears.
Yeah. I mean, the panning out after starting as a child actor into growing into adulthood is very fraught. And we've talked a lot, especially for the 80s kids. Man, they were not shepherded very well into adulthood, many of them. And so these two, we have Billy and Billy Sr. Bill, Dr. Bill, who's a dentist, who's Chelsea, Jane Fonda's boyfriend, and his son. They arrive at Golden Pond, and the way that Norman is a proxy for this generational posturing. Billy walks in, and he is just a wisecracker from the jump, and he's just sizing up this old man and like, who the hell do you think you are? And what's great is like Norman is like, this is a teenager. This is fine. Like, I can handle this. And he kind of is charmed by his sass, if you will. It's like, because the naivete of a teenager's overconfidence can be compelling to some, right? It can be obnoxious too, and he doesn't completely enjoy it. But Bill Sr., played by Dabney Coleman, he starts off, so he enters the space, and he's very awkward. He's a California dentist, so you get the sense of like, it's all pastel and shades for him, and he's in the dark woods, and he's like worried about bears eating him.
Yeah, exactly. There are bears here. Okay, let me ask you. And he comes in. He's wonderful. They stay. Everyone else goes out skinny dipping. He stays in with Henry Fonda.
Yeah.
What do you make about the first thing that he wants to talk to Norman about? Is, I just want to make things clear. Me and your daughter are going to sleep together tonight in the same room. Isn't that a crazy question for 45-year-old to be asking?
Well, I think this is the generational nature of this film. And this is the dialogue it's in with. The way that Bill's character walks into him and he's all, yes, sir, no, sir. And even though he's spitfiring barbs at him, it's it's like, so you want to see my teeth? And he's and he's really rough on him from the jump, Norman's character, and he just takes it in stride, and he's literally sweating, which is so wonderful. But at the same time, it's like out of a 50s sitcom is the way I saw Dabney Coleman's character. And he almost makes me think of the Eddie Haskell character from Leave It to Beaver, where there is this formality of how you're supposed to present yourself as a child to the greatest generation. This is what your job is, to be meek, be polite, but I'm an adult now. And I could, with my friends as Eddie Haskell, I could undermine my, what I thought of these kind of loser adults. But now I'm an adult myself, and I can push back. And as you said, what's so funny is he chooses to do this. And so this is the sparring to talk about, I want to sleep with your daughter in the room. And the way he treats it is we want to sleep together is what he says. And Norman just fucks with him right from the jump. He's like, you want with whom? What? And he's like,
all three of you?
All three of you? Billy? And he's like, no. So you and Billy then? It's like, no. So you and it's just, and he's just killing him. And
it's hysterical.
And it's this idea of you're supposed to be this still. I'm the old man. And this is in part about the fragility of Norman's character. And this is, again, this stuff is very out in front and on the nose. And a lot of this is I may be old. I know I'm old, but don't be such a dick, And then, but at the same time, Dabney Coleman's character and Bill is I know I'm younger than you and I know I'm supposed to be polite, but don't be such a dick, And he basically says, it's I know you're having fun with me, ha, ha, ha. And this is the good striking generational difference where Billy's more authentic. He's like a classic teenager. He's he pushes right back immediately when he gets a barb from Norman. And that's what makes their relationship develop throughout the film and is so charming, actually. It's he calls him out on his shit immediately. Every single time.
Why are you yelling at me, right? When it's that's the greatest thing is and I feel that with various people in my family or whatever, why the fuck are you yelling at me? And I think my kids feel that way with me.
Yeah. And so, whereas Dabney Coleman, because of his history with this generation, he can't do that, and that's one of the things about this. It's Ethel, as the wife of Norman, she's made the choice to be with this man who's cantankerous and of a type. But when you're born into this generation and you have to take this, it wasn't your choice. Their personalities and their way of engaging people is something you have to endure. And that's very much what both Billy Sr. and Jane Fonda represent, is that the boomer generation, the way that they were compelled to endure kind of abusive parenting, right?
Yeah. But I just think, Billy Sr. could have thought of a better way to start off this conversation with this newly met man of his girlfriend's father and saying, just to be clear, we're going to be sleeping together.
Well, the best part, all right, to talk about what I think is actually what this is about, he's dude, I'm dating Jane Fonda. I'm not going a day without an opportunity to be with Jane Fonda. And he's and he says this. His character literally says, he's a guy, he's like, he's Dabney Coleman. He's not a looker by any stretch of the imagination. He's a dentist. So he doesn't have like this sexy job and he's about town and introducing, Chelsea to like wonderful people. It's like he's got his hands in people's mouths all day, right? And so he's scored, Chelsea. And he says to Norman, it's like, lately I've been feeling really good about myself, being with your daughter. So I think it's really primal, this need, and he needs to spell it out.
But isn't there also this sense that he and Jane Fonda, both of them, were at this kind of like retreat where they were trying to get their lives back on there's this sense, it's not spoken, but there's a sense that they met there and that's where they came. And then there's also the sense that Jane Fonda, obviously this isn't her first, relationship, first husband. And there is obviously
first boyfriend, post-husband.
Yeah, and that's parallel, right? Mm-hmm. Jane's kind of real life. So there's all these they're not hiding the similarities, and these characters are stepping in and out of their real life. All of them seemingly all the time, which must have made acting in this somewhat odd, right? Because where's the line?
Well, I mean, we'll get to that because in the end there is this line, because the performative nature of this reconciliation comes out in the movie, and we'll get to that. But before we get there, I think there's another kind of important context to talk about, which is Billy and Billy's relationship with Norman. And Billy as a character he's the proxy of our generation in the sense of the child of divorce. And I'm a child of divorce, as so many of my peers were. And the way his father treats him, the Dabney Coleman character, we learn very quickly through Ethel speaking to Norman. Ethel tells her husband Norman, it's like they want to leave Billy with us for a few weeks so they can do their retreat thing and go off to Europe, blah, blah, blah.
For a
month, right? And they're so like,
who goes to Europe for a month?
I know. Well, I mean, yeah. Well, they go to Brussels, as we learn later, and that's right. Yeah, he's discarded, right? He knows he's discarded, and he knows, and his father literally tells him to his face, if you don't behave, because he's telling him to go back, and so he's like, I'm going skinny dipping, not you, young man. And he's like, tells him to go back inside to talk to Norman. And he's like, no way, man. I don't want to talk to that old creep, which is an awesome line, And he says, look, kid, if you don't behave, I'm going to send you back to your mother, which is like gut punching. It's such a nasty thing to say. Like the classic using, your kid as a tool of leverage against your former partner, which is classic ugly divorce shit,
Totally. And that's the point where he does ultimately go back inside. And when he goes back inside, they finally have somewhat of a conversation about, what is it you do out there, in your life? And he's like, cruise chicks and suck face. And there's that whole weird Generation X sayings, like what these kids are. And and that comes back at the end of the film. Like that's Henry Fonda's last great line in film. But there is that sense, you do see that connection. And I think the funnest connection of the whole film is actually that between Henry Fonda and Billy Jr. Right. And they're kind of, and it raises all sorts of questions that Jane Fonda gets pissed at in the movie. And you could imagine, did he really want a son? There was Peter Fonda, but he was all fucked up on psychedelic drugs, and he was gone. So
he's not my son.
Exactly. So when there's that whole thing, and you feel the awkwardness, and Jane Fonda plays it out he gets along great, these two. Yet there's still this unbelievable tension and turmoil between him and his own daughter, and I just the whole backflip and all those scenes. It's just so. You don't know where the line is. You never do.
Jumping too far ahead. Let's talk about Billy a little more, about Billy and
I need to talk about it.
Yeah. So Norman and Billy, though. So you're right. Transitioning from Billy as this child of divorce who's discarded, and the way he does that in classic divorced kids way is once Billy Sr. and Chelsea jet off to Europe and leave, he instantly turns on on Norman, and Ethel says, like, just so you know, I'm not going to take any of your bullshit. And he's like, you know, I don't even think I'm going to hang around. I think I'm going to like go to like Wyoming, you know, like what the fuck. And the way they take it in stride, they're like, and what's interesting is you've already talked about it alluded to the idea of like Chelsea gets jealous, but what's important is for Norman, this is a second shot, right? Like, because even Billy is aware of the bad relationship between Chelsea and her father, you know, where even though he said this bullshit line, in which so wonderful is Norman's response to it, it's like, really like that word bullshit. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, good word, you know? And he's like, I'm meeting you at your level. I get it. Life is fucking hard and it sucks. And like, let's figure this out. And as part of this figuring out, Ethel says, let's all go fishing. And he makes that happen. But as that in the process of that, he's giving Billy Chelsea's fishing vest. And Billy says, like, I'm surprised you kept it because it's Chelsea's. And that's like this, like yet another one. It's like, he knows you have a shitty relationship with his daughter. And so
because that's all Chelsea's talking about probably to him and to her new boyfriend, right?
Right. Yeah. And so what's interesting is Billy becomes this proxy for a second chance, and this becomes preparation for reconciliation. He needs this little doll to play with to learn how to be a good dad, right? Throughout the 2/3 of the film, ultimately. And it's incredibly charming, like their relationship and the way they call each other's bullshit on each other's bullshit constantly throughout the remainder of most of the film is wonderful. And allowing him to, drive the amazing old antique wooden boat, the motorboat and stuff like that is pretty great. So that's kind of the one thing. And so that I also think to talk about, and this is what's interesting to me is, so this is, literally Henry Fonda dies 6 months after this. And Rydell tells a story of how 5 or 6 months after the picture's done, Jane Fonda calls him up and says, like, you have to show the film to my dad. He's literally dying. And he's like, oh, okay, hurry up, get him here, and we'll bring him to a screening room. So they set him up in a screening room. Rydell goes and lets him watch it, and he's hanging out and he's got a timer, and he literally he knows when the film's exactly over, and he comes back, and Henry Fonda comes up to him, and this is Rydell's an actor, so it's a really kind of a performative story in and of itself in this documentary, and he talks about it's like how Henry Fonda kind of stumbles and falls into him. And he's shaking. He's like, holy fuck. He's like dying right now. But he realizes he's crying. Right. And he says, I thank you for doing this. And it's like, what was the exact quote? It's like, thank you for the best moment of my life. I don't know if I completely believe it, but if it's true,
I don't buy it at all.
Yeah. I don't.
I mean, sure, it maybe happened, but put it in context. It's like, obviously the way they'll say it in the documentary, it's like, ta-da! And everything. It's like, no,
and that's what I keep forgetting to bring up. What is interesting about this, because we keep talking about how this is this artifact and connection to real life, in all these pieces that exist after the film is over, we never hear from Katharine Hepburn, nor do we hear from Henry Fonda, because he dies, and what they thought of it. And so that's kind of, to me, the interesting missing piece, right? It's like, because even Jane Fonda talks about this reconciliation that exists in the movie, and we're going to get there. She mentions how it's incomplete. It's not like it existed in real life. At least I got to produce it and make it appear like it happened. And, but we never hear his point of view, nor does Katharine Hepburn, because Katharine Hepburn famously always eschewed the media. So she wouldn't be like, what? Do you want to sit me down and talk about the making of the movie? I'm not doing that. Because she was around for another 20 years. It's not like she couldn't have done it. And she kept acting too.
Yeah. But I mean, I respect her though for not only these people now getting on podcasts and talking shit on it. It's like, show some self-respect, right? But I do think the thing that is interesting is, I think that this is obviously Jane Fonda did all the work, and this is very personal, but I think it was also a very practical political move. This in some ways puts the Hanoi Jane years and all of that 70s stuff behind her. Sure. And it opens up a whole new part of her career. You know, she becomes a media mogul. She marries into, CNN and Turner, exactly, and she becomes a billionaire, right?
Yeah.
Like all of that long distance kind of fuck the police and fuck power and fuck war and all that stuff is gone, right? And she's part of the power base. So, I mean, this is a shifting moment in that regard. And part of that is trying to seal up, it's not just about, that's why I don't buy that totally, that story. It's not just about family. This is also about an image of the Fondas and an image of, this is all neatly wrapped up. And I'm not suggesting that he was just used or she was using him. All those things are real, but it's also a shift, right? And it's kind of like a shift that most boomers made, right? They started to get into their 50s and 60s, and all they want to do is make fucking money. Defund all of our pensions.
Go, Jim.
Screw the fucking Generation X, right? I'm on you. I'm with you now. That's what the boomers are really about. And she's like, classic boomer. This is a classic boomer move.
She dropped the bad. she dropped the bad. Fuck the police like a bad habit, like they all did, right? So
Elvis was the hero to most, but it never meant shit to Jane.
Yeah, and so as part of this narrative, it's interesting that you say it's a performance of the reconciliation, performance of the reconciliation in the film, and the continued performance in the way she talks about it, and God, it was on daytime talk show interviews. You hear it again and again, the same story, and the story goes like this: in the final moments of the film, where she's come back to pick up Billy, Dabney Coleman's got to go back to California. He's got to get his hands back in people's mouths. He's got work to do. So it's just Chelsea, and she's like whining and literally her mom slaps her in the face, like, get over it, and
nice. I love that,
and just like, he's dying, you moron, you don't have much time left. It's like just in the nick of time, right? And so she makes this attempt to connect, and she's jealous of the connection that he's built with Billy. And, maybe he never wanted me. And this led to this is the stuff that preceded the getting slapped in the face moment. And so she goes to him and she talks about it. And so in this moment, she says this thing to, her father's character. I think we could be friends, right? Like, that's the kind of big message, like a real father-daughter relationship. It's like, we're friendly, we're going to be friends. And she tells this story in post about how her father was very meticulous, wanted everything rehearsed, which is not surprising. Like, improvisation of that era didn't exist. You stick to the script, you respect the script. And even Rydell talked about how much they respected the script and stuck to it. That's what they do. And so she held on to one take where she grabs his arm, and I believe her, because if you watch closely, he does get choked up. Like she got him, right? She drew him in, she reeled him in. And it was all the effort she could, muster in that moment emotionally to make it happen. And so I appreciate for her that real connection, but you are right. This becomes the performance of the story of the film as much as the film's story. And it finishes with, she's like, I'm so emotionally exhausted from that effort. When it's my turn to now showcase my emotions, I'm spent. All right. And she tells this story of having to turn away, and she's telling Rydell, let me get there. And in the bushes behind her, it's not her scene, is Katharine Hepburn, and like rallying her with her fists. You can do this. And it's this. And this one I want to believe, I really do, because I do think there is this kind of spiritual connection between, the early feminist Katharine Hepburn and the later, radical feminist and still in this moment of Jane Fonda, even though they're classically both socialites, women's of wealth feminists, right, and liberals, and they come from a lot of opportunity to be able to perform this like role of radical, right, and. Sure. And so she does this, and that becomes like, and that's the canon, right? You're right. It's this canon and transition of like, I'm wrapping up my relationship to the past. They're not speaking anymore, literally. And now we're taking over. And so that's a funny way to end this, isn't it? You know,
it is a funny, but are we talking about the ending now?
Yeah, because that's where I am, right? Is that cool?
So, yes, I just want to make sure. Sometimes I get ahead and then I get yelled at.
Jim,
you're shooting off too early, Jim. Shut up. But the best part is when Billy Jr. is saying goodbye, and he's like, "Take care, you nitwit."
Yeah.
And then he says, "Goodbye, woman," to Katharine Hepburn. So, like, I just love that. Like, for me, like, I could quote that, "Take care, you nitwit." I still, my dad, you know, who's probably, he was 87 when he died last year, right? He called people nitwit. Nitwit was a big word he would use. And just to hear Billy Jr. call, you know, who, and obviously Henry Fonda he called the kids on the dock who filled up his boat. A nitwit, because he wanted to tell them how expensive or how cheap gas used to be.
Think it's funny being old?
It's hysterical. I'll kick your ass. Exactly. But like that whole use of language, like that whole nitwit and woman, and the way Billy kind of becomes a part of their world is like, I like that. For me, those subtleties between Henry Fonda and Billy were far more compelling than the over-the-top schmaltz that you're talking about with Jane Fonda, where she dives into the water, and then earlier on, she's like, "I'm not fat anymore. I'm actually getting ready to do a VHS exercise tape. Look at me. You know, I run the biggest exercise gym in Los Angeles." Like, she's a specimen. And she's got all of the benefits, and she's, you know, already, as we talked about, by 42, she's an absolute icon. So it's kind of painful on some level to watch her do this to her dad.
I agree. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, it is where Billy's reconciliation, if you will, with Norman is a real process. It's slow and deliberate. It's through spending real time together, right? Like, it's this idea of, if you want to make a relationship with me, you have to make an actual relationship with me. You have to actually spend time with me. And I know I'm cantankerous. Well, you're a pain in the ass too. Let's agree to be pain in the asses to one another at times, but it's through bridging that you're going to have a real relationship. And there's a moment where, you know, earlier in the film where Norman is setting a fire in the fireplace, and he's absent-minded as his character's presenting, being like, you know, showing some lapses, and it leads to a fire starting in the house. Like, it's put out very quickly, and between a combination of Ethel and Billy's characters, but Billy dumps the fish that they've been cleaning and all the water in it, and he's like, "Jesus Christ, what kind of a mess have you made?" And he's like, "Dude, why are you yelling at me?" And it's because, like, he's taking it, and then he calls him a son of a bitch because he's mad at himself. And the fact that Billy takes it, and he has this caring woman to explain what's going on, and they're really spending time together. And we haven't even talked about, like, their Moby Dick and Walter that they're hunting for this, you know, this trout all over the place, and it becomes they have a shared mission, and that's what makes real relationships, in contrast to Jane Fonda in her generation creating a relationship out of a performance. And that's what we're talking about here. And what's the contrast is real, because his response to, "You want to be friends? Cool. Fucking come here more often." Yeah,
exactly. Come see me.
You know, right? And he tries to put it on, it's like, your mother would appreciate that. But hi, Dawn. What it really is like, that's how relationships are actually built, is with time spent together, no matter how hard it is. And you know, in the contrast, it's interesting. Like, you think about the first two films, Make Way for Tomorrow and Tokyo Story, and the pressures of modern society telling us, like, children naturally are pushed out of the home, and it's not easy for them to stay connected to parents because modern society dictates they have all these responsibilities financially and otherwise to get ahead. But at the same time, don't expect them to be there for you, which is what she wants in this case.
Yeah.
Like where in the first two films, the children were like, I don't want you at all. You know, I wish you, for the most part, didn't exist in my life anymore because you're just a burden. In this context, she's saying, no, I want you, Daddy. I need you, Daddy. I wish you would be there for me, Daddy. But it's like, but on my terms. And this is like our kind of refrain again and again about this generation. It's like they're dictating the terms of engagement, and it's through a presentation of what things are supposed to be rather than something that feels authentic, which is interesting because that's what defines the early stages of our generation, is this idea of authenticity. Right?
Exactly. And there's something else. I agree. And there's something else here too, with like the beginning of the 80s. So this is 81, right? And you're starting to see like this is the beginning of the Reagan era. This is the beginning of another generational shift, and a generational shift like we saw in Japan for Tokyo Story or saw during the Depression. That's going to have real long-term implications on generations in terms of wealth, in terms of work, in terms of the shifting relationship of the state to the individual, and how much so like the greatest generation dying off, the boomers coming in and taking their piece, and Gen X being sitting out there like, like poor Billy. You know how Billy's life. He's a crackhead somewhere in LA by the end of this decade. And so like that's really how this is going. But the other piece I want to exactly sucking face with a crack pipe. But like the last piece I wanted to talk about, and there's another reason why this movie is really hard for me to watch, is in the early 80s, when I used to go up to Lake George, my good friend had a boat that his dad bought him. And so we would do like that. It wasn't a teak boat, although those are all over Lake George, is near like Sagamore and all that. It was beautiful. Was it called the Sagamore? Or it was called something else? Anyway, I'm forgetting. But anyway, we used to water ski on that boat. And we were on the boat with his sister and his sister's friend. And he was water skiing and I was driving the boat. And so I was turning around, looking at him, making sure, like, hey, whatever. I fucking ran into a rock.
Oh, no.
And almost killed everybody.
Oh, gosh.
It was horrific. He still was like, kind of laughed at it. I talked to him recently. I saw him, we all got together and he was like, yeah, that was rough. But his dad, to his absolute credit, and he was like from another generation. He was like, oh, looks like you really messed up the boat. We're going to have to figure that out, aren't we? That's the last I ever heard of it. Never freaked out, never said anything, was absolutely cool as hell. And that's when I see little Billy crashing the boat into the rock, right? Like I can't help but see my own situation, but then also how my friend's dad reacted.
Yeah.
If it was me or my dad, it would have been a fucking explosion, right? It would have been, God damn it, why? This guy, he was probably thinking that inside. He was like, what kind of idiot does my son hang out with? But
shockingly, I guess the trauma that the character Norman goes through in the picture leads to him not being upset, but at the same time, you could still easily see him exploding and I think that's so much about like this has been such an interesting exploration we've been on these relationships that lead to discussions of our own histories with our parents and our parents' relationships across generations. And I really like where we landed with this idea of, Billy's relationship with that generation versus the daughter, with the greatest generation in the Norman character, and versus the boomer generation's relationship feeling more performative. And maybe like in our idea of authenticity is something birthed out of this kind of moment. That's kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, I love that. Right. Yeah, that's super cool. True. All right. Well, that's another one for us, Jim Groom. Back in the books.
God, we're so good. God, we're good.